Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about the Epstein Files. But this story is about so much more than a pile of documents. It's really about the survivors' relentless, years-long battle for the truth, and what happens when a demand for transparency goes terribly, terribly wrong. And yeah, let's just start right here with this quote. It's from the attorneys representing survivors, and it just hits right at the painful heart of this whole thing, doesn't it? A process that was supposed to bring justice, supposed to finally expose the powerful, ended up doing the exact opposite. It re-traumatized the very people it was meant to protect. So to really get why these files became such a flashpoint, you kind of have to go back. Because before any laws were passed, before the politicians got involved, this story was being kept alive by two crucial groups: investigative journalists who just refused to let it die, and the survivors themselves, who bravely kept speaking out. The real spark that relit this fire was a bombshell expose from the Miami Herald back in 2018. They just dragged Epstein's ridiculously lenient 2008 plea deal back into the spotlight. That reporting led directly to his arrest in 2019. And of course, a month later, he died in prison. But the fight? It was far from over. The call for justice just got louder, carried on by survivors and their families, who demanded that all the federal records finally be unsealed. All of that public pressure, that constant demand for truth, it eventually made its way to Washington, and it led to something you really don't see very often: rare, bipartisan action. So how on earth did this grassroots demand actually get turned into a federal law? Well, what happened next was remarkable, mainly because of how fast it all went down. After being floated as a campaign promise by Donald Trump, the Epstein Files Transparency Act just flew through Congress. It passed the House, got a unanimous thumbs up from the Senate, and was signed into law by President Trump the very next day. I mean, things in D.C. never moved that fast. It just shows you how immense that public and political pressure had become. So, the law passed. It promised this new era of transparency, right? It was supposed to finally drag all these ugly secrets into the light. But the actual release of the documents, well, it was so plagued with problems that it created a whole new nightmare, especially for the survivors. And it's so important to understand what the files actually are, because it's not just one simple list of names. That's a huge misconception. In reality, it's a massive, incredibly complex collection of evidence. We're talking millions of documents, photos, videos, emails, all pulled from at least 6 different sources, including the criminal cases, multiple FBI investigations, and even the investigation into Epstein's own death. And the scale is just staggering. By January 2026, the Department of Justice had pushed out 3.5 million pages. 3.5 million! And the challenge wasn't just releasing them. It was the monumental task of reviewing and redacting every single one of those pages to protect sensitive information, particularly the identities of the victims. And right here, this lays the whole disconnect bare. The official promise was a rigorous process to protect victims. Sounds good. But the reality, which the government itself admitted, was that inconsistencies will likely exist. That gap between the promise and the reality, it would turn out to have absolutely devastating consequences. Now, this is what redaction is supposed to look like. The idea is to carefully black out all of this sensitive personal information, protecting people's identities while still releasing the substance of the documents. This is the ideal. This is what was promised. But as we're about to see, the execution, well, it fell catastrophically short. This quote from survivor Anuska DeGiorgio really says it all, and she would know her own driver's license was exposed in the document dump. The process that was meant to protect her ended up harming her, and it wasn't a one-off error. Attorneys reviewing the files said they found what they called literally thousands of mistakes. And these weren't just minor oversights. We're talking about a systemic failure. The Wall Street Journal found the names of at least 43 victims had been exposed. Nude photos were published. Some redactions were so poorly done you could easily reverse them. The problem got so widespread that the DOJ had to set up a special email inbox just for victims to report errors. Think about that. You're a victim, and now it's your job to report that the government has failed to protect you. Again. But here's the twist. Despite that deeply flawed release, the information that did manage to get out sent absolute shockwaves around the world. It triggered brand new investigations and ended the careers of some very, very powerful people. For the very first time, we saw direct and serious legal consequences for some of these high-profile figures, especially internationally. A former Prime Minister of Norway was charged with corruption. And over in the UK, it was a stunning development. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and the politician Peter Mandelson were both arrested. But holding a few people accountable didn't translate to public satisfaction. A CNN poll from that time found that an overwhelming 94% of Americans were not satisfied with the file release. 94%. Despite millions of pages being public, there was this widespread feeling that the full truth was still hidden, that real accountability was still out of reach. And this brings us to the final, crucial question. The law was supposed to bring transparency. And the files are open, technically, but when vital information is still hidden, and when survivors themselves were actively harmed by the process, was justice truly served? That really is the unfinished part of this story. Thank you for joining us.